Welcome to the Outer Realm with Michelle DeRoche and Amelia Pisano. Airing live on the United Public Radio Network, 105.3 FM in New Orleans.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Thursday night segment of The Outer Realm. We're broadcasting live on the United Public Radio Network, UFO Paranormal Radio Network, 105.3, 107.7 FM from the beautiful city of New Orleans. We are also live on Roku. So if you guys have Roku, you can watch us from the comfort of your big screen. Anyway, we are fully sponsored by the amazing people over at Folgers Coffee who have been a part of our journey since the very beginning. So thank you, Folgers. We appreciate you so very much. Also, big thank you to Justin Snicker, Dr. Snick, the sonic surgeon, for his contribution of his music and his voice for our intro and outro. He is an award-winning composer of Halloween horror, sci-fi, and dark wave electronic music, which can be found on places like Bandcamp, Spotify, iTunes, Amazon. So check him out. Tonight, we welcome the return of John Kachuba, who's going to be discussing Ohio Hauntings and lots of paranormal fun stuff. If you want to participate in chat tonight, guys, please know we're down to 7 chat rooms because Roku does not have a chat room. You just get to watch. So head over to, let's see, YouTube would be UFO Paranormal, UFO Gods and Extraterrestrials, The Outer Realm. Then we get over to Facebook with news on the flip side, Canada's Most Haunted, UFO Paranormal United Public Radio, and of course, The Outer Realm. So Wayne's chiming in. Michael, Adrian, hey. I see we're loading up. So this is great. I think it'd be a great time to bring our guest on. So why don't we just do that? Hello.
Hi, Michelle. How are you?
Oh, good. How are you?
Doing well.
Like that little bout of enthusiasm. Woo!
It was great. It was like I can feel the vibes all the way here in Ohio.
Isn't it great?
Even on this big windstorm we're having right now.
Oh, you too? We're having it also.
Oh, are you really? Yeah, it's unbelievable. I mean, things are just blowing around like crazy out here.
Oh, yeah. Not good when you're trying to have a stable connection for a show.
Right. I know.
If we lose you, we'll know why. Ditto, too, okay? So
hopefully that won't happen.
No, hopefully. So, wow. How are you? What have you been up to? Fill us in.
I'm doing good. I've been busy. I have two new books actually coming out this year.
Ooh.
So right now we're in the stage of doing cover design with the publishers and formatting and things like that. So staying pretty busy with that and just trying to keep myself safe and out of COVID and everything else.
Everybody behaving themselves.
I know.
How you stay healthy. I know. Yeah, I get that. Well, I've been looking really forward to this. We don't get into nearly as much paranormal as we'd like to because we just have such a waiting list. And by the time people come on and you can get to different topics, it's like, gosh, I just feel like it's been a while. So Ohio, I have friends in Ohio and a lot of them do paranormal investigating, and it's definitely like a hot zone.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, I'm not a native Buckeye. I didn't grow up in Ohio, but I've been here now probably 25 years. So I guess I sort of am at this point. But when I first came out here, I was amazed at how many stories there were and how many haunted locations. Right. And how many books have been written about Ohio ghosts. I have 2, and there's a bunch of other writers. There's dozens of them out there.
Right.
People always say, "What is it about Ohio?" And I said, I don't know what it is. It's just we have a lot of interesting dead people, I guess. I don't know what else to say.
Well, I mean, you guys are famous for the Ohio State Reformatory in Mansfield. That seems to be a real big one. So, because when you mention ghosts, you mention Ohio, this seems to be the one place everybody comes up to, but you don't realize that there's so many other places.
Right. Well, when I was writing my 2 books too, I obviously had to include some of the famous places like the
Yes.
OSR, the Ohio State Reformatory, and some other places that are really well known. But I
Mhm.
was also trying to find other places that had not been written about yet. And I
Yeah.
found a lot of them. And what I found amazing, Michelle, is, I do a lot of public speaking at libraries and universities and things like that, and on shows like yours.
Right.
Every time I do it, at the end, when I have a Q&A session, people start telling me their ghost stories. Okay, great.
Right.
Then they'll
Right.
say, well, do you know about this haunted tavern? And I'll say, where is it? Right across the street.
Oh,
It's
how
like,
did I not know
really?
this?
So, I mean, I was
Wow.
finding all these places. The only thing is I don't write about like private homes, out of,
Yeah, of
for
course.
privacy. So every place that I write about and that I investigated were places that are open to the public that you can actually go to,
Right.
which I
Right.
find even more interesting because now the books become sort of like paranormal travel guides.
Right.
I'm going to take I actually had a motorcycle club that two of them came to one of my talks at a library.
Very
And
cool.
I see these guys in the back end. They got, they got the colors on and chains. Oh my God, this is a
We got
library.
stories. Yeah.
Well, the guy came up to me at the end. He said, I'm really interested in that book. And I said, here, you can have it.
Yeah, just take the book. Take the book.
He said
Yeah.
every Sunday, he said, we get together and we take a ride and we go to someplace
Right.
just, for a ride. Usually we go someplace and we have dinner at a restaurant or something, right? So he said, we're going to use your book and we're going to go to some of the
Oh.
haunted restaurants that you have in here and everything. So,
Oh,
okay.
wow. So that's kind of cool. Yeah.
Yeah, it was
Just
fun.
selling 3 copies of the book. Here you go. Anyway, I think that's really awesome. I like, I've always promoted the public places as well, because it's nice when you can talk about something and people can actually go and experience it for themselves. I know whenever I travel, I prefer to stay at haunted locations for that reason. So I would be one of those people that will get one of your books or book for the area that I'm going, or I'll get online right off the bat and go, okay, I need to know where, the best place to stay where I'm apt to get a little bit of activity, or a lot, whatever.
Yeah.
So, so what do you want to talk about? Which locations do you want to start with? And it don't have to be in your book. It can be,
Yeah.
or you could
Well,
tease
actually, I mean,
people.
yeah, because I've had, besides just doing Ohio, I mean, I wrote 2 books about Ohio, one book about Illinois. Then I have another book called Ghost Hunters, which was more about the people that do the paranormal stuff,
Very
like
cool.
like the Warrens, for instance.
Yes. Yeah.
I knew those folks, and so I wrote about them.
Mhm.
But I've
Yeah.
done a lot of work in other states besides those.
Right.
And I remember probably one of the weirdest places, I think, was a place that I did in Florida.
Right.
And it was it is now let's see, trying to think of the county, Hernando County. It's the Historical Society, Hernando County.
Right.
And the home used to be a home of a doctor
Right.
back in the Victorian era, like 1870s or whatever. And supposedly it's haunted. They say that, well, his wife died in childbirth
Oh.
in the house. The
Mhm.
baby survived, but the baby died like 3 years later from some
Oh.
cholera or some disease.
Yeah, so bad. Kids didn't stand much of a chance
Oh,
back
in
then.
those days, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
they didn't have
Yeah.
a chance, half of them,
Mhm.
But so she is supposed to be the ghost there. And it's interesting because the house has all these old Victorian furnishings in it, including
Mhm.
some of these toys, which are like, some of them are like cast iron kind of toys.
Mhm.
And the docents that worked there would tell me that they would make sure at night these things were locked up in a cabinet. They'd come in the next morning and they'd find them like scattered all around the house, upstairs, downstairs.
Wow.
They had a little cradle, little baby, for a doll cradle. And they
Mhm.
came in one morning and the thing was broken all apart. I mean, it was totally fine when they
Oh,
locked up. Next when they come, So
wow, wow.
they asked
Maybe
me to
bad
come.
memories for mom,
Well, yeah,
you
it's
know?
interesting. I don't know. But they said,
Yeah.
she was harmless. There were some other ghosts too that didn't seem to have any connection with the doctor or his family. But they asked me
Mhm.
to come in and do an investigation there. And I met
Right.
with a ghost hunter from Tampa. And the two of
Mhm.
us spent the night there. And absolutely nothing happened. It was like dead quiet, right? So it was
Yeah.
the two of us and the supervisor. And she's all apologetic. She's saying, "Oh, I don't know what's going on." She said, "Normally there's all this activity, everything, all the time. You guys
Mhm.
come and it's quiet." I said, "Well, I've been there before. It's not,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
not."
well, they don't know you, right?
Yeah.
Like,
But
yeah.
so So at about maybe like 3 o'clock in the morning or something, and we say, okay, let's just forget this. There's nothing happening tonight, So
Mm-hmm.
we start walking out of the house, and the supervisor is making sure all the alarms are set. She's going around doing all that. So there's only one door that we can go out. It's in the back in the kitchen.
Right.
So we go through the kitchen, which is set up again like an old style kitchen. There's this wood burning stove there.
Mm-hmm.
The three of us are in one line because, being well prepared ghost hunters, we had one flashlight among the three of us.
Right.
Yeah. So in the middle, holding up like this, we're trying to stumble out,
Right.
When we go past the stove, the surface had like a big round sort of iron disc on it, and it had a bolt attached to it, an eye bolt, and there was this hook probably about 18 inches long, and it was wrought iron. It was pretty heavy. Right. The idea was that when the stove got hot, you would take that handle and lift up that lid and drop some more wood and then just close it over because it'd be too hot to touch, right?
Right.
So this thing is laying across the surface. And as we walk, I see in the corner of my eye, I see it rises up, right? Now, again, this is about 18 inches long, but it doesn't just rise up. What it does is it flips over. It does like a 180, right? It just comes up and over, and it hits the stove like that. I mean, it just slams down on the lid and actually pops off on the floor.
Wow.
Yeah, that's exactly the words that we said. the three of us stood there. We said the stupid thing like, "Did you see that?" Yeah, we saw it. I mean, it was like literally right 6 inches away from us, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we don't know without. I mean, it defied all laws of physics and any natural law that I know of.
Mm-hmm.
And to see that, and here it is, the three of us have all our gear packed up, cameras put away, everything else, walking out the door. And that's when it happens, right?
That's always the way. I mean, I try to chalk it up as you go to a location, you're a stranger to them. They don't know you. They're still people, spirit people, but they're still people, so they're trying to maybe figure out, who you are. You might have those that say, well, if I'm really quiet, they'll just go away and not come back. Or you get those that are more curious about you, and they're just trying to get a feel for you and get to know you. And then the more times, which I'm sure you can attest to, the more times you start going to a location, all of a sudden things just start to unravel because they know you. They build a rapport with you.
Yeah, well, I think there's something to that, and you get more comfortable in that environment yourself. And what I do a lot of times is I don't belong to any like ghost hunting paranormal group or anything,
right?
But frequently I'm invited by various groups that they know my work and everything. They say, well, why don't you come with us? We're going to go someplace tonight and do it. Okay. But what I do when I get to that location is frequently they're setting up. A lot of times they have a lot of gear and they're setting up all their stuff. But I always try sometime during that investigation to get away from everybody, and just go off and find a room or something by myself. I just sit there very quietly, and I have a practice of meditation every day, right? So I just go there, and basically I it's not a trance or anything mystical like that, but I just, sort of take a couple deep breaths and I just kind of meditate, and just because what that does is it lowers all sort of all the barriers that you have that prevent you, and I put that in quotes because they don't really, but sort of we don't want to say that we can see things or hear things. It's like people don't want to hear it.
Right.
If you get that, if you get yourself alone like that and drop all those barriers, then things sort of enter into your environment. And that takes a little time to do.
It does. It does.
It works.
Yeah. I've tested that theory many times. I think it's just a matter of, being a constant presence. I've had locations that I've worked at for years, that have asked me to represent them in a paranormal standpoint. And I'm like, okay, you kind of go in there, you're kind of like, it's like crickets. There's nothing going on at all. And over time, all of a sudden I'm just kind of keeping to myself, and all of a sudden, I'm just doing a recording, or I'm walking around. And whenever we have public events, I like to go around. And even when we would film here, I would go around and say, okay, this is the deal. This is how many people are coming in. This is what's going on. Partake if you like. Don't partake if you don't want to. I don't care. I'm just letting you all know there's going to be strangers in the house. And then, boy, some nights, we've had camera crews come in here and coins are dropping from the ceiling and they're videotaping it. And I'm sitting there going, this never happens here. This never happens in this house.
Right.
And we live here. It's like,
Right.
so I think it just depends on the person. Maybe if there's something they really like about
Yeah,
you, they'll show off a little bit. And
I think so. I
yeah.
was doing a library talk one time, and when it was over, a woman came up to me. She was an older woman, and she was very quiet. She introduced herself and said that she was a spiritualist minister, in the spiritualist church.
Right.
I said, oh,
Right.
it's very interesting. And she said, she asked me, she said, can you see auras? And I said, no, I can't see auras. She said, well, I can. And I can see yours. And I forgot what color she said. But anyway, she said it indicated to me that you were sort of sincere about what you're doing and going about it in the right way, kind of a respectful way.
Nice.
And she said, so have you made contact with spirits? And I said, this was pretty early on when I first started doing it. I said, I don't really think so. And she said, well, you will, because of the way you approach it, because of your attitude. She said, they're going to be attracted to that. They're going to sort of come to you.
Right.
Which, it's probably happened since then. So.
Right. Right. Well, I'd say so. I mean, you have experienced enough to be able to write several books.
Well,
So, I mean, there's got to be something to that.
yeah.
It's funny, you mentioned having, like, when you're doing talks and having, like, this older woman, of course, being spiritual, she's going to be a bit more comfortable. But I've done talks as well at retirement communities where I was asked to come in, and I always thought to myself, it's going to go one or two ways, because I feel that the elderly, they're the keepers of your history, and they know so much, about areas and about, places that you think are haunted, and they'll know everything about it because they grew up in that area. But they're very funny, because you get some, it's like they don't want everybody else within their retirement community and the retirement home to know that they've had experiences. And they pull you aside very quietly. Like, I have a story. Okay. It's adorable. It's like, but sometimes that's where the best stories come from.
Right. Yeah.
But.
Well, yeah. And in my books too, between those two Ohio books, there's probably maybe close to 60 locations or something in those two books. And, obviously when I went to them, I can't say that I experienced something every time I went. Sometimes it's one quick visit over a haunted hotel. I spend one night there or something. Maybe something happens, maybe it doesn't. But what I do in all the books is I interview people that are there all the time.
Yes.
So like at a haunted hotel, I talk to the housekeepers, the desk clerks, security guards, anybody like that. If there's a restaurant, the wait staff,
Yes.
And these people are there 24/7, and so they tell me their stories. They tell me what they've experienced. So it's really interesting when you put all this together in some of these locations and you see this kind of stuff.
I think it's fascinating because you have to take in eyewitness accounts, and sometimes you may experience nothing. I've stayed in haunted places, over and over, the same ones, and some nights it'd be something subtle, just like footsteps, and around the room. Sometimes it's nothing. Other times, I've had like people pull, something pull the blankets up on me. I was at a location one time and the blankets are coming up, and there was pretty malevolent energy there as well as a lovely spirit family. And I'm thinking, okay, they're either trying to just make sure I'm warm, or something's going to try to smother me. So I'm waiting for it. It's kind of like, which one's it going to be? Oh yeah. I mean, you never know. You're sleeping by yourself in there too. It's just, some of the experiences.
I know, Michelle. There's a fine line between warm and smothering,
I know. I just, I'm sitting there. You're just waking up kind of like going, something's touching me, so you're half asleep, so you can't really quite tune in. And it's kind of like you see the blankets, you look, and I see the blanket coming up and going, which is it? So, don't want to panic. But thankfully, it was just trying to keep me warm.
Yeah, well, and you never know. My wife and I stayed at a place in Ohio called Riders, R-I-D-E-R, Riders Inn.
Right.
Riders 1812 Inn, and it's in Painesville, Ohio, which is up north.
Wow.
It was built in 1812. It was a stagecoach stop and all this. There's only like 3 or 4 rooms, I think, in it. And it's supposed to be haunted by the first innkeeper there. And there's stories about a fire that broke out. And apparently the ghost actually opened the door and let snow blow into the kitchen where the fire was. And the snow put the fire out and things like that. But So my wife and I stayed up there, and I said, to the innkeeper, of course, well, what's the most haunted room? And she said, this one, whatever, I forgot what it was. Okay,
Right.
so we stayed there. Now, my wife has a PhD in toxicology, right? So she's a scientist.
Right.
So, so she
right
says
there.
to
I know
me,
where you're going.
yeah, she says, now, this is your gig, right?
Right.
and I'm not buying into it. And I said, well, okay. But so we were in bed, and it was about 2:00 in the morning. It was seasonal. It wasn't, the air conditioning wasn't on in this hotel yet. They do actually have air conditioning.
Right.
The heat had been turned off. So it was like in that seasonal change, right? So there wasn't any kind of furnace noise or air conditioning noise.
Mm-hmm.
But all of a sudden, it's about 2:00 in the morning, and we feel like this draft, like the room got cold.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't just like a draft. It was like a wind, like a directed wind that came up at the foot of our bed and came like right up over us and like sort of passed somewhere behind us in the wall behind us, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was so pronounced, we both woke up and we said, what was that?
But it's good when even the scientist is going, what was that?
Well, and so the other thing about the scientists in this particular story is that in this room, they had one of the original nightgowns that the first innkeeper wore, and they had it up on like a dress form, right? So it's standing in the corner at the foot of the bed. So you wake up at 2:00 in the morning with this wind blowing up to you, and you see this white form standing there. So she doesn't go with me anymore,
I'm good. Yeah,
I'm
I
done.
love that.
But the funny thing about that wind, so it was really unusual because, as I said, none of the windows were open. There wasn't any reason for not just a draft, but a wind. But when I woke up the next morning, I hadn't seen it before, but there was a little bedside diary where, guests come in, they record, great stay and all this stuff, right?
Yeah.
And there were maybe 3 or 4 entries over the course of a couple of years that talked about being woken up at around 2:00 at the same time by some strong wind that blew into that room. So I said, and I didn't know that until afterwards. I said, well, that's unusual because it was different times a year, different years, different people.
You get the same sort of experience.
Right.
Wow. Wow. That's very cool. I love hearing stories like that. It's so subtle, like it wouldn't take, how much energy do you think it would take a spirit or being to project something like that? Full body apparition, it's going to take a lot. Some people can see them like this, they're just there. You can touch them. It's happened to me in all my 2 decades of doing paranormal research. If I've seen a full body apparition 5 times, I'd be surprised.
Right. That's unusual. Although, you see TV programs and everybody's seeing full body apparitions apparently.
Yeah. But I don't know. For me, I'm pretty open-minded. I've been touched. I've had all kinds of amazing experiences captured on photographs, spirits with me, behind me, things like that. Amazing EVPs. I've got like phenomenal library of EVPs. But when it comes to like full on where I can reach out and touch you, I maybe a handful of times.
Yeah.
You
mentioned EVPs, and I always think those are pretty good. You can catch a lot of EVPs at different places. There's a place, I was teaching at Ohio University for a while in Athens, Ohio, which is in the southeast part of the state in Appalachian, Ohio. And there was a place there that was called the Athens Lunatic Asylum. And it was built like 1873, and it was a gorgeous, it's a huge stone building. And if you see pictures of when it was built, it was incredible. They had their own farm. They made bricks. They raised cows and pigs. They had orchards, and the patients did all the work. There was a fountain. They had an alligator in the fountain. I don't know why, but they had an alligator in the fountain.
It's crazy.
So this big, beautiful building, eventually closed at some point and everything else. And Ohio University bought it. So they've got this thing sitting up on a ridge over the river. Beautiful location. They nicknamed it. It's called the Ridges because it is on a ridge.
Right.
And it's supposed to be really, really haunted. Now, the thing is, it's an enormous structure. And because of safety considerations like asbestos, bad floors, bad ceilings,
Right.
Most of the building, probably 90%, is locked down and unusable.
Wow.
At some point, the university, they
Mhm.
were able to rehab part of it, but it's going to cost a lot of money to do the rest, and who knows what's going to happen. But in the meantime, the stories about that place have been incredible, about these asylums. And I was asked to do an investigation there because I had a friend of mine who was an art instructor at the university. And he came, and so the artists, the guys who taught art, had their private studios in the ridges in this building. That was the one part.
Oh,
Yeah,
right.
literally in the
Wow.
patients' rooms. They literally just moved out the bed and moved easels in, right?
It's
And there was even,
crazy.
there was still graffiti on the walls and stuff from patients. Things like really heartbreaking stuff, like on one of the windowsills, somebody had written, "If I had wings, I'd fly out of here," and all, from
Right.
patients. So
That's
anyway,
sad. Yeah.
he said to me that he said, "Yeah, it's weird. People come and go in this building, and a lot of them are friends of the artists and stuff like that." He said, "But we're seeing people we don't know, and we look around, and they sort of, we see them for a minute, and then they're gone." And he talked about going into the men's room, which was kind of a long rectangular room with the door at one sort of end of it. So if you stood in that doorway and you looked into the room, what you would see across the other side were a row of mirrors and sinks. So if somebody was standing there, you'd see the reflection, right? So as he walked in there, he saw a guy reflected in the mirror, and it wasn't him. And he didn't think anything of it. Oh, there's a guy in here. So he turns inside there, and there's nobody there. And he's standing in the only doorway in and out of the room, right? So because of that, they asked me to do an investigation, and I invited a team from Columbus, Ohio to come down, and we went in that building from the attic all the way up down to the basement. And all these floors were locked. You weren't supposed to be on them. But because I was teaching there, and I knew who the facilities maintenance people were, and I knew what a 6-pack of beer would get me.
The bribe. Very nice.
So we went all over the place, and we had cameras set up, and we had the sound recorders set up, and all this kind of stuff, and we carried some with us. But long story short is, at the end of this, there was a room in the basement. The basement had several rooms that were literally what you would call the padded cells, where they kept patients who were just uncontrollable, who were dangerous to themselves and to others. They kept them locked up there. Right. So we had a recorder in one of those rooms. We just let it go. We let it play, and we closed the door and left it. So after we broke down the investigation, started listening to all this stuff, we're listening to the recorders. And as you know, going through all this stuff, looking at video and listening to recorders is like, forever, right? It takes forever. So we're listening to this recording. We're not hearing anything, just white noise. Then all of a sudden, in the middle of that, we hear, "Would you help us?" Just like that. "Would you help us?" I said, "Oh my God." When we heard that, I mean,
what do you say to that?
Right up your spine,
Yeah.
It made sense. It made sense because if you were a spirit from somebody in that time, and you were locked up in this place, and you saw somebody out there, wouldn't you be saying, "Help, get me out of here. Would you help us?"
Yeah.
And that EVP, Michelle, was so clear. The group that I worked with was called the Ohio Exploration Society. And I don't know if they still have a website anymore. I don't know if they're even around anymore.
Right.
Had a website, and they had posted that EVP on there. It was clear. I mean, you probably know some of the EVPs that you get, somebody will say, "Well, it sounded like he said the body is under the sink."
They don't even know. Yeah, this is like a class A, just perfect, right?
Yeah, this was like unbelievable. Anyway, that place has a lot of history, and the university, of course, is really clamped down on letting people out. Well, they never let people out there. People were breaking into the building.
Right. You get one hand, you got people trying to get out, and on the other hand, you got people trying to get in, right?
That's right.
What is it about the asylums, do you think, that or prisons, what, like, the type of energy, what is it, do you think, that makes them that remain behind? Residual or angst? Like, what is it? Do they know they're dead?
I think most of that is residual. I think that people who are disturbed, when I say disturbed, I'm including people in prison too. They're disturbed in a different way. Maybe not mentally, some of them, but they're all undergoing a lot of anxiety, a lot of grief, a lot of
Mhm.
tension, stress, and I think all that. We know that we're electric, and we know that we give off sort of vibes, if you will, for lack of a better word. And I'm
Mhm.
thinking that's what happens there. And so you create this environment that stays. It just sticks to that environment. So I
Mhm.
don't think when we were there, yeah, it's a good question. I think in that case, it sounded more like we were actually interacting with something in real time, though.
It
Um,
does, like, it sounds
yeah,
very intelligent, they're reaching out to you.
yeah, yeah.
Like, I often wonder,
Mm,
you get into situations where maybe they don't realize that they've passed, I guess it depends
right,
on the mindset. What kind of a state of mind were they in at the time of their passing? If
right.
you're not of sound mind, let's face it, it's the energy is so much different than the physical. What puts you not of sound mind? Is it the physical part of you, or is it just the psyche? What you become through the journey. You get those who are, they're stuck. Is it they're
Yeah,
stuck because they just don't think they can leave? It's, again, that mindset. Because I think a lot goes back to our religious belief system, possibly the way we're conditioned. Back in the 1800s, even before, it's like, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, all these commandments. You had a lot of people who took that very, very seriously. So when you pass away, oh, I'm going to take my chances and stay here.
wow,
Depending on what you may have done, you're kind of like, yeah, I'm good. So
right.
I don't know. I think it's a lot of different situations, but you just find these places are beyond just one spirit.
Yeah.
Bleed-throughs, dimensional bleed-throughs and residual energies. Yeah, I could just see that. But that's
Mm.
like a replay thing or just leftover
Yeah,
sounds, you know.
right. And this was certainly more active. But yeah, to your point too, you get folks that don't want to leave. Even if they understand, you can say, well, your time is done. You don't belong here anymore. There's some that just
Mhm,
don't want to go. We
mhm,
did an investigation in an old abandoned farmhouse in the middle of central Ohio.
mhm.
Myself, and a couple other people, and one of the persons brought in a Ouija board,
Ah.
which I said, do we really?
Yeah, dang it.
Yeah.
I know, yeah, yeah.
Anyway, we did, and we spelled out a name of a woman. I think it was Esther, but I don't remember anymore. But we said,
Mm,
"Who's it?" Spelled out. But then we said, "Okay, well, when were you living here or something?" It was like 1869 or something like that. But
mhm,
at one point, um, we were actually working. We had a psychic with us, and actually, the psychic was asking these questions, and she
right.
said, "Well, um, would you like us to help you move on to?" Because she had said somewhere in there that her daughter, her son, I forgot,
Mhm,
lived in the house and that she was looking for them and all that stuff. We said, well, they're not there, but would you like us to help you move on? And the planchette, the thing just shot over to no on the board, and it stopped. It wouldn't move. It said like, I'm not moving. I'm not leaving this place. So
oh,
yeah. So at that
yeah,
point, I said, let's put the Ouija board away, and
right. Yeah, I would be done with that,
because I don't know
yes,
what we're dealing with here.
yeah.
Um,
Well, I mean, that's the thing, I guess you take chances on what are you really dealing with. I find with guests of older times gone by, not so much modern, especially when you have old farmhouses, and then let's say a new subdivision gets barreled onto this property. Back in the day, what made you wealthy a lot of times was your land. Your land sustained you. You might have been born in your land. Your children were born in your land. You died on your land. You're buried on your land. You had either cattle or you had crops. It sustained you. You couldn't just go put on a light. You had to chop wood to be warm. You had to take the lard, just to me, just to cook or have candles and light. And life was really hard back then. And I think the chances that you want to give that up, you're still holding on. Some spirits just fought so hard for it, or people
mhm.
that, come across, spirit people just like, no, it's mine. You can't have it. I've worked with families. They're just like, Like again, they're renovating. It started renovating. It's like,
Yeah.
ooh, you didn't tell them what you were doing, did you? We did it. We did it here, and we found here when we started restoring the spirit. One spirit family member would show us where things were. We found a door here that was completely covered that we never would have found. That had all this beautiful wainscoting in it, all this this beautiful woodwork. We're like, but that's because that's the spirit woman who's like, oh, what about this door? We're like, door? Dang it, there's a door.
Oh,
You know, so I think sometimes a lot of hauntings could be a little less drastic if people would just bear in mind. If you think you have something going on, maybe just say, hey, we're not trying to wreck your place. We're just trying to make it better. You know, I
yeah.
don't know. Call me crazy, but
No.
you know, sanitariums, jails, hospitals, retirement homes have energy from people crossing over in death. Makes me wonder if the excess energy opens portals for other things in the paranormal to happen alongside hauntings and residual energies. That's actually a good point because you can imagine when the spirit leaves the body, the imprint in that time and space, just from a quantum aspect of what it like the imprint it would leave.
Mhm.
I mean, I don't know about the portal part of things, but I imagine that would leave one heck of a good spot on the environment, so to speak. Oh, hey, nice to see you. So, you know, going back to a couple of comments, you'll see me just bringing this up just so the viewers can read them as we're talking. My experience, spirits can hear our minds. They can actually speak if we listen. There are different states of perception that alter spirits' own perceptions. Yeah, I believe that.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Sure.
This was a good one. Going back to your artist friends, I wonder if the artists were influenced by spirit
Ah,
when painting because it's a very meditative.
yeah.
She's a painter, so yeah, yeah.
That's a good point. Like I said before, I meditate and think that sometimes that's what helps me make contact, and I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah, art is definitely that way.
I've met mediums. I'm a frequenter of Lilydale. I used to love to go to Lilydale,
Yeah.
and I used to get spirit paintings done, and it would just be so fascinating to see them just go into these trances and just start and bang on with with everything. It's just like wow, I
Mhm.
it's just amazing the way they can just put it all through their artwork. Brian says my wife and I used to run a haunted BB. Yes, to which I have been to. A number of our guests had interesting experiences. Yes, I have to say I also had an interesting experience because one of the gentlemen, prior owners to the house, used to like the ladies. So of
Uh,
course I'm there with a friend of mine, and she's like sacked out, and I'm waking up in the morning because I feel this hand, this finger going down my neck. And I'm going, and I look over, Adriana, she's sacked out. I'm like, you so better not be doing that right now. Anyway, she's sacked out, and and the hand keeps going. I'm like, that'll do. And it just stopped. So I remember waking up in the morning saying, so about this guy.
how was your night? Well,
Yeah, I was like, so he goes, yeah, that's about right. That's about what some people experience. I'm like, okay. So you see, very subtle and not harmful, but
Mhm.
just very personal, right? So anyway, yeah. I don't do portraits because other things show up in paintings, not the person I'm supposed to paint. Oh, that's interesting.
Oh,
But she's also gifted. Yeah. So interesting for sure. Um, yeah, so yeah, I think the asylums and prisons and United
mhm.
States seems to have a lot of these old structures that come up. I mean, if you want to buy an asylum or a prison, United States is the place to do
Yeah,
it. Like
yeah,
every state's got how many does New York State have? Like there's quite a
right.
bit.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
Pennsylvania,
yeah.
right? So
Well, we went through this whole period, at least in America. I don't know about Europe or other parts of the world where mental health was just locking people up, and that was
yeah.
before we had all these breakthroughs in pharmaceutical medicine, psychotropics, and antidepressants, and
Mm,
antipsychotics, and all these kinds of medicines.
right.
So we would lock people up. I mean, yeah, women get locked up for menopause, or I mean, like
Oh, your
really?
husband could
But
just get bored of you, you'd be locked up with
That's
your
right.
kids.
That's right. Somebody can
Yeah,
literally
it's
just
true.
sign you off and say, "No, crazy
Yeah.
person, get her out of here," or him out of here, you know?
Yeah, it's true.
So we had these huge facilities, but then once that all those medications became available, they emptied out
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
people could be treated at halfway houses or totally home
Right.
on
Right.
medication, you know?
Yeah,
So,
then
yeah,
then
you
you
have all
have,
these crumbling buildings.
well, look at the criminal element, pleading insanity, and they're fully sane and going in and
Right.
causing havoc to people who aren't of sound mind or who are in, pretty bad predicaments. And then that's where I think you get that element of um, that control element. Not to mention some of the staff back in the days. I mean, you get
Oh,
really some asylums. I mean, you actually have personnel who are pretty aggressive when
yeah.
researchers are you're going around investigating, and they're really having negative experiences
Right.
with some
Right.
of the staff members. Some are protective, others are just like, "No, I'm
Mhm.
overworked." I'm overworked
Well,
and
yeah,
pissed off. So,
right.
you
I
know
think of the movie, Jack Nicholson, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, based on that
Right.
novel, you know?
Right.
And then that, Nurse Ratched, I mean,
Yeah.
that's the way it was in a lot of places, you know?
Oh, it's true. Yeah,
So,
it's true. Alan says, define old. Currently, the US is extremely young on the world stage. We think 100 years is old, but Europe, 100 years is nothing. No,
yeah,
yeah, I've been to Europe several
that's true.
times, several places. And I know you just feel like you go to this place that's, I think one of the oldest places I've stayed in was probably going back to the 1100s. So, and that's just like, we can't build them that good on this side of the world.
Yeah,
We really can't.
right.
But I
Yeah.
don't know. The amount of old churches that you can buy in the USA is amazing. Also, how many small towns, like in Brian's small town, who he and his wife had B&Bs, I think there were 4 on the street churches.
On one street, yeah.
That's the first thing I noticed. I'm like, I was counting them. Like, 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm like, it's a lot of churches on one street, and that doesn't factor in the whole town.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, Ohio is much like that as well, right?
Oh, yeah,
Like,
there's a lot. I was just saying, I know a couple of people that have actually bought small old
oh, I
churches
love
and
that.
remodel them to a home, they're
Yeah.
living, you know?
Oh, yeah. I
So,
love that. I love that. I've looked at that myself, you know. We just bought a new house, and I'm thinking, buy a church. But I found this colossal church. I'm just like, but it was the same price as a house because you can't sell it. But you can imagine what the taxes are when there's like it's on a freaking city block. It's like,
right.
you know. But oh, the tales, oh, the tales. So okay, so let's move along. So what's some of the more I mean hardcore places? Have you done any really hardcore places that caught you off guard? You kind of go in there thinking one thing, like, oh, this spirit here is just this lovely woman, and she's going to give you some good experience. All of a sudden, you end up with like, okay, she's either really hardcore, this woman, or there's something else here that somebody didn't tell me about.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think probably one of the darkest places, and I don't mean that just physically, but mentally,
Hmm.
was OSR, Ohio State Reformatory. But yeah, I'm sure you've been there, probably, right? And um, that's a tough place. I got some EVPs out of there that were just kind of
Mm.
strange. I don't know how to describe it, but I was kind of prepared for that because I had already known some of the historical
Hmm.
background to this place, and it wasn't good.
Right.
I mean, there was guards that were killed, there were inmates that
Oh.
were killed. It was a pretty violent place.
Hmm.
So it didn't really shock me in that regard. But I think what really shocked me was just how it felt. You know,
Mm. Yeah.
I did one of the overnight investigations there, which is really cool because you can wander around the entire facility. You have all night to do it. You can go wherever you want.
Yeah.
But it's also dark, and it's actually just physically a dangerous place to be in. I mean, they've done a
Yeah.
lot of work there, but I know
Hmm.
they had this one gigantic cell block that's supposed to be the tallest freestanding cell block in the world. And
Wow.
it's these iron catwalks and stairs, and they're rusty and everything else. And you're up there in the dark, you know, 5
Yeah.
stories up or something, and it's like,
Mhm.
you're kidding me. Yeah, no lights, and but it really hit me. And I know I was there with with a person who is a psychic, and as we're walking along the row of cells, all the cells are open.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just feeling sort of that. Wow, this place is dark.
Mm-hmm.
But she's going. She'll stop it and go. Guy with a white T-shirt, cigarette pack rolled up under his sleeve. Bald guy laying on the cot. And I go, what are you seeing? And she was seeing all these people.
Right. And they're all in your vicinity, which is great.
Literally, we're just walking by their cells saying, hi, how you doing? There's all these people in here that I'm not seeing, but she's seeing.
Right.
Oh, okay.
Right. And that's got to be weird for her because she's in this, I mean, you're in it, obviously you're in a jail cell. There's all these men there. And sometimes researchers will sort of present themselves as the trigger object. Let's see how they react to a female. Right. And she's just pegging them all off. Like, how does she feel about all of this? Like, all right, we're surrounded.
Right. It was pretty intense, but
yeah. So, what do you do in a situation like that? I mean, I always go to voice recordings. People have all this fancy equipment.
Right.
I'm old school. I really like just doing voice recordings. Not that I don't have all the equipment, but I like voice recordings. I more than anything. I like taking pictures, but you seem to just really bonus out when you get a picture because that doesn't happen very often. Recordings seem to be a little bit easier to do. Trigger objects. Just I don't know. I'm old school. I just don't follow her to set up this little puck over here, and I'm just like, it's too much work.
Yeah, no, I'm the same way. I mean, to your point, Michelle, I carry, have a recorder in my pocket or something. It'll be turned on all the time. It'll be on from the beginning to the end.
Mm-hmm.
And I carry a camera and just take pictures. I also carry dowsing rods, though.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, what I do with those is I don't say that they help me find a spirit, but what I'm looking for is some change in energy that I can sense. Mm-hmm. So actually, that old farmhouse that I was telling you about before with the Ouija board thing, there was a barn on the property, and the barn was empty. Nothing in there anymore. Just an old barn falling down. And I went in there with my dowsing rods. And for me, if I have the two prongs are straight out like that. And if I have a positive, for me, they cross. People say different things, but for me, it's a cross. So as I'm walking around, I think, I'll play around here. So I get some areas where they cross, and I go, "Oh, that's interesting. It's just dirt floor."
Mm-hmm.
And so I step out, and they open up again, and I'll step in, and they cross again. So I'm walking around, and literally what I'm doing is I mapped out like an area. It was a rectangle. It was probably, I don't know, maybe 10, 12 feet long by 6 to 8 feet wide. I'm thinking, what is this? Right? I don't know what it was. So I'm doing it, and the guy who owns the property comes in. And he sees me with the dowsing rods, and he says, what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm just getting something. He said, oh. He said, you found the car. I said, the car? What are you talking about? He said, there's a car buried here under the floor in the barn. I said, is there anybody in the car?
Yeah, right? Who does that?
I mean, I'm half Sicilian. I mean, maybe, I don't know, I mean, my Uncle Louis, I don't know.
That's not a common thing, man, for sure.
but so I said, what's a car? He said, I don't know. I said, how? You don't know? He said, no. I left it at that. I mean, there's a car buried under that barn. But the funny thing is, there's this big hunk of metal I was able to detect. I had no idea what I was looking for. I wasn't even looking for anything. I was just fooling around and suddenly realized I was kind of mapping out this area.
Like you have this mega disturbance, but that's really unusual. Usually when you hear stories about cars being buried, there's usually someone in it. They don't want anybody else to have that car when they're long gone.
That's right. And I would like to dig up that place and find out what's in their car, But
I say yes, do it.
Yeah, right. Well,
that would make a heck of a TV show.
I was working that night with Sherry Brake. I don't know. Do you know Sherry?
No.
Okay. Yeah. She was big in Ohio. She now is West Virginia. She does a lot of tours to Ireland and things like that too. But she's a real good dowser as well. And she was mapping out areas around the property where she was finding bodies. And what happened was that somebody came in with infrared. Actually, they were thinking there was an old cemetery there, and they actually asked Sherry to douse to find if she could where there may be bodies buried because there were no headstones anymore, whatever. And she found some places that they then went with infrared equipment and detected, there were human remains here. So that was pretty cool. That was just outside the barn that she was finding, So maybe there is somebody in the car.
Well, right? Like I don't know. That's a curiosity. I'd be all over that just because it's just so unusual.
I know.
Alan says, could a metal detector have done the same as dowsing rods? If you knew you were looking for a car, but you didn't know he was looking for a car.
Right. And so what I do for dowsing rods, I started to say is I just look for areas where I detect energy, and it could be coming from like running water, it could be coming from electricity, it could be any kind of kinetic energy or whatever it might be. I don't know what was causing it really to register for that, because it was just a big hunk of metal. It was a car. As far as I know, the engine wasn't running or anything. So,
right.
I don't know.
I don't know. All I know is now I'm going to be thinking about this car. But, how many others? I mean, how many others are out there like that? That's just a curiosity. Just ask it. Yeah, no problem. No problem. Ask away. So what's the most famous place that you've been in Ohio or anywhere? Famous and that everybody just like, flocks to or would to flock to.
Yeah, I think the Ohio State Reformatory is still probably the most famous in Ohio. Like you mentioned, even as he came on here, that Ohio.
Well, that's what people have.
Right, and it's become. I mean, the group that has been maintaining it and everything has done a great job. Promoting it, taking care of it, cleaning it up, repairing it. Advertise it a lot, and if you want to go to they're booking like months ahead of time.
Wow.
So it's really, people come from all around for that one.
And for those who don't know, what is the story of the reformatory and the type of activity that you get in this place?
So it's in Mansfield, Ohio, which is sort of kind of northeast of Columbus. And it was built as a reformatory, a boys' reformatory for teenagers and kids that were, wayward, got in trouble or whatever. At some point, they decided to turn it into an adult prison. And the history there is just, I don't know what causes it or what caused it, but it just had a very long history of apparently, bad personnel and bad inmates. And things just happened horribly. I mean, at one point, one of the guards, was killed by a bunch of inmates. He was murdered there. Several inmates have been murdered by other inmates or by the guards. It's just one of those places where I think it just was not in control. I think it's the way to say it, And I don't know how long it was in existence, but it probably closed. Maybe somebody out there knows the details, but I'm thinking it probably closed maybe around the 50s or 60s, something like that.
Oh, wow. That recent.
Yeah, I think so, but I could be wrong on that. But the interesting thing is the movie Shawshank Redemption, that a lot of people know, was filmed there.
Fantastic movie, yes.
Yeah, so if you watch that movie and you see his big stone edifice, you're right there. That's the OSR, Ohio State Reformatory.
Wow.
And actually part of it, you can take a tour there. You can take some tours during the day. And of course, you can do an overnight there too. But they also have kind of like a movie tour. So they'll take you to different locations within the prison that was actually in the movie. And they even have some of the props. Like I think they have the warden's desk or the warden's chair or something from the movie.
Oh, still there. Yeah, that's cool.
Set up and everything. So it's pretty cool. But the history is just, there's been a lot actually written about it. And it's just a bloody, violent history. They say it's been one of the most violent prisons in America over time.
Wow.
So it's got that kind of history. Like I said before, you just feel it walking in. You know, you don't have to even see anything. You just walk in and you go, yeah, this is not a good place.
Right. It's still carrying over. What kind of activity or experiences do people report?
There's a lot of EVPs that come out of there, but people have had have gotten some interesting photos too. But mostly it seems to me EVPs and a lot of as you said earlier, getting touched, getting shoved, getting pushed, that kind of thing, which, again, considering the location, that's not good.
No.
You don't want to be on a
Anywhere you're
catwalk,
standing, it could go
Yeah,
bad.
right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a pretty interesting place.
Right. So what are your thoughts and I'm asking this because I saw an article come across social media today where there's one gentleman is trying to prove that um, that spirits can touch people and they can attack you, they can touch you, it could be a physical thing. What are your thoughts on that?
He's trying to prove that he can do it?
Well, yeah, what are your thoughts on being like spirits being able to just touch you? Because a lot of people
Yeah,
believe that this can't be a thing, that they can't hurt
right,
you, they can't touch you, they can't push you. Like there's a lot of people who lean towards that in their research, and other people like, no, this is a thing.
right, right. Well,
Hmm.
in my personal experience, I've never been, to the best of my knowledge, I've never been touched, by a spirit. Uh,
Right,
which doesn't mean that I haven't been on locations with other people who have said, "Whoa,
right.
something just hit me in the ear," like you said, or ran a finger
Yeah.
down my spine or something.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
so I mean, it happens, and I've been in places where it's happened to other people, but not to me.
Hmm.
I have a little bit of difficulty in sort of trying to figure out what a ghost, a spirit, can actually do at all.
Right.
Um, to be touched implies that they have some sort of physicality to them,
Yeah.
some corporal nature, right? That they're not just essence or energy or whatever.
Yeah.
But at the same
Yeah.
time, you really, I mean, lightning is all energy, and
That's true. That packs a punch.
yeah,
Yeah.
right. So, I mean, I don't know if we go along that route that ghost spirits are just energy, sort of
Hmm.
the energy that's left of us at some point.
Hmm.
Well, then maybe it's possible that through some mechanism that we don't understand, they could literally sort of zap you, and you
Right.
feel it. Not necessarily electric, but you feel like, what was that? Like something touching
Hmm.
or something. I mean,
Yeah.
I think it's. I mean, I think it's possible. I don't know how we'll ever prove one way or the other. I
Hmm.
don't know how we prove anything on ghosts.
Yeah,
But
I think that's pretty much the gist of it. Whenever I would be asked in an interview, I'm just like, I'll let you know when I get there because there really isn't anything definitive about it.
no,
Question for you. Alan says, I'm curious as to why John gives more credence to the psychic's feelings than his own gut
no,
feelings.
that's a good question, Al. Because actually, when I talk to people that are want to know how I do things, I say, okay, as I said before, I go in pretty simple, just a couple of a notebook, a recorder, and a camera. But I
Yeah.
also tell people to pay attention to what your own body tells you. And I'll give you an example. That house that I mentioned in Florida, it's actually called the May hyphen Springer House.
Hmm.
It's Hernando County, Florida. It was a doctor's house, and I remember walking up the stairs to the second floor, and I was in better shape than I am now, but I can still do it. I walked up the stairs. I wasn't out of breath or anything else. But when I got to the landing at the second floor, I suddenly felt lightheaded, and I felt sick to my stomach. And I grabbed the rail of the stairs because I felt like I'm almost dizzy. And I was
Mm.
like, what is that? What's that about? And the superintendent of the house who was accompanying me on the tour said, "Are you okay?" I said, "I just kind of feel a little weird." And she kind of nodded, and she went like this. I go, "What? What are you looking at?" And over my head was a trap door, and there was an
Mm.
attic up there. And she said that the doctor, he obviously in those days the practice was in his home,
Mhm.
come to his house. She said that he would put patients who had something that was contagious or viral or whatever.
Mhm.
He would put them up there so that they wouldn't be. He'd minister to them, but keep them separated from his family, from other patients, and all that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she said a lot of them died, and that they bring the body obviously down through this trap door and then out the house.
Right.
She said, "You're not the only one that feels that when they get up here." So I do tell people. I mean, Alan's right. I think you do have to pay attention to what's going on, what you suspect is happening, and listening to your own body, whether it's being
Mm.
lightheaded or sick to your stomach or whatever it might be. People react differently.
Mhm.
But if you walk into a place and you have some kind of a physical shift like that,
Mm-hmm.
It's not part of, it's not an illness you have or anything else.
Mm-hmm.
You might want to pay attention to what that's about.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think people need to pay attention to what they're going through physically. And if you're very empathic, like some people will pick up on, if somebody died in the house, maybe what they were going through. Like if you had dementia, for example, or Alzheimer's, like people might feel a little bit disoriented, a little bit confused.
Right.
Somebody might have had some anxieties. You might feel anxious. Those are all feelings that I think people may just misinterpret as, well, I'm just nervous to be here. That some people like to go investigate, go to haunted places, but their comfort level is at arm's length. So maybe, they're not paying attention to maybe why they're really feeling that way. I think this is where it's important with the research that you're doing for your books, is just knowing the history.
Yeah.
People don't realize how important it is to know the history of a location when you're going in, which brings me to my next question. Do you prefer to know ahead of time when you go to investigate a place, or do you prefer to find out afterwards, so it's just a big old surprise?
Yeah, a little bit of both. I like to have some history, some perspective.
Right.
But I don't want to hear a history of like people being murdered or ghost history. Don't tell me that. Tell me that this was built in 1782, and that during the Revolution, it was attacked, it was a fort or something. Tell me that if I don't know that. But don't tell me. And now people now see, no, I don't.
Yes.
Give me a little background so I understand the location.
Right.
But that's it. And then afterwards you find things,
Yeah.
Give an example of that. There's in Cincinnati where I live, there is an astronomical observatory that is actually the oldest public observatory in the United States.
Wow.
And it was originally built, there's 7 hills around Cincinnati. It's built on 7 hills, like the city of Rome.
Right.
And on one of them called, the observatory was actually put on one of these, hills down by the river in the city. Mm-hmm. And you know how old it was. The cornerstone was laid by John Quincy Adams, 4th president of the United States, right? So that's the oldest place is. Well, it's moved up a little bit. Cincinnati got, foggy and polluted, so it had to move out of the city a little bit. But anyway, long story short is, I was given let's see, the historian at the observatory called me and said, I had heard you on a radio show and I'd like you to come down and check out the place. I said, oh, okay. I had no idea what he meant. So I went down there and I checked it out. And as we were, I went with another guy, and the two of us were just kind of walking around, and we didn't sense much, but the historian told me that a psychic had been there and thought there was something going on. We said, okay, well, we'll come back at night if you want, and we'll do an investigation. The guy said, yeah, sure, do it. I'd like you to do it. So we did it. And what we discovered by doing a little research was that in 1944, I think it was, I'm not exactly sure, it was during World War II, there was a physicist who was working, astrophysicist from the University of Cincinnati, who was at the observatory at night, and he was working there. Now, this observatory has this ancient telescope, and it's huge. It's on this high mount. And the astronomers, the way they get to it is they have like a set of like stairs that they can move, and you can climb up at any level you want. So it turns out that we found this obituary in the New York Times that said Dr. What was his name? Dr. Elliot something. I forgot his last name. He's going to haunt me now. Anyway, Dr. Elliot, whatever his last name was, I forgot what it was. But the story was that the obituary said that he died, in the observatory during this 1942 or something, while working. We said, what do you mean? And the obituary said that he climbed up on these stairs. And this is an old observatory where the things are moved by pulling in ropes, lanyards and turning wheels and all that stuff, that he climbed up to the telescope mount, put the lanyard around his neck, and stepped off the stairs. So he hanged himself, right? We said, what? That doesn't really? And this was in the New York Times, which, I mean, that
Yeah,
That's in
that's pretty
Fox News.
major. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
this
it's
was
pretty major.
so so we did an investigation at night. That's the information we had. And so as we're doing this investigation, we're in the room and we're in the observatory. We're in the dome. There's telescope is right here. And we did what you see on television a lot. We just basically addressed the room. Is there anybody here that would like to speak to us? Whatever.
Yeah.
And we had recorders going. And so my friend said, we understand that somebody may have died here.
Mm-hmm.
He said, is it Dr. Elliott? And I can not remember his last name. Anyway, is it Dr. Elliott? Okay, well, we don't hear anything, right? We play back the recorders later on. And we hear him say, we're in this room. We hear somebody died. He said, we heard somebody actually maybe committed suicide. Is it Dr. Elliott? And then we hear right after that, we hear, right.
Wow.
Right. You got it.
Wow. So he's still there. Wow.
Right. But what I'm wondering about was, we did a little history. We had that information before, purely by accident. We just kind of stumbled across it as we were doing some research on the observatory.
Mm-hmm.
But then it seems like when we go in, the investigation corroborates that. You get this EVP saying, "Yep, you're right."
Yeah, here I am. See, it's so much mixed feelings because you need to know the history to guide your investigation, right? But then there's that element where you're just like, but I want to discover things. I don't want to, I don't want to know everything. For me, it's like I'm always the one people want to deal with. I'm the one in the forefront. And so I usually put my own abilities aside because for me, it's contaminated information. I already know everything. So I work with other mediums and, can collaborate, things like that. But I always have mixed feelings about that. It's just so, I don't know. You have to know, but then I don't want to know everything. Like I used the haunted forest in Romania when I went there. I didn't want to know everything about it. I knew it was the most haunted forest in the world. It's like, okay, that's all I need to know. And after that, I found out, based on our experiences, like, it's Romania's Bermuda Triangle. It's under a no-fly zone. I'm like, what? So I guess, you don't need to know everything, but it's really hit and miss. You guys have a lot of serpent mounds and things like that, and giants. Have you ever investigated some of those?
I haven't. I've been to them. It's been quite some time. And when I was investigating, when I visited them, I was interested more in the history and wasn't really doing much paranormal stuff at the time.
Right.
But I'd like to go back. There's been tales, especially from Serpent Mound, which is probably the most famous out of all of them. There's a lot of mounds in Ohio, and they're small, some are quite large, but the Serpent Mound, you see it from the air. It's incredible,
Yeah.
And they're thinking that they're not really sure still what that was about. They think it's got some religious meaning to it, some spiritual meaning to it.
Mm-hmm.
And even the position of where it is along a river and everything may have something almost like maybe connected to ley lines or things. So we really don't know much about it. And I also have other weird feelings too about a place that is sacred to like indigenous people.
Yeah.
I feel strange about, going there and saying, I'm going to look for a ghost. Instead of just honoring the place for what it is. But I'd be fine about going back there and again, sort of having that, that respectful attitude of not really trying to make contact with the spirit and, but just to be there and take in some of that spiritual essence that might be there.
I think in situations like that, you could always consider contacting the local tribe of the area, and just say, can you guide me through? A lot of them will have guides and say, yeah, we can tell you what our people went through. I mean, up in Canada, they're just very, very good about things like that. But I think coming from a historical standpoint, I always say the dead speak. They do, obviously, very intelligently in some cases. And I've been brought on to do locations specifically, I guess out of that standpoint, not just which spirits are here, but just to see who wants to talk about What happened? One of those situations where you just don't have the answers. For
Sure.
example, we filmed a show here few years back, and a lot of people go over the falls, right? It's just like they all, the ones that pass. It's all history. There's no getting around that. You know who the historical people were that went over the falls, who died, that sort of thing. And the objective was to find out what they were going through at that moment. So, one was chosen. I don't know anything about it. I don't follow that. Like, I just don't follow it, right? And he collaborated. We were able to bring him forward with mediums, the work of two or three mediums. And this person came through. And the objective was he sat in this barrel with an anvil, and he tied his hands to the top to make sure he would be stable so he wouldn't go. But the anvil wasn't secured, and the only thing they ever found of him was an arm.
Oh,
Yeah. So, but he collaborated all of that, and he started saying things like, I should have listened. My friends told me don't. Things, it was just, so we went in at that point, and the information was given to us after the fact. And I was just like, then I started thinking, what about people like Mallory? Like climbing Everest, like there's so many questions, like the Dyatlov crew on the Dyatlov Pass, that went up in Russia, and just like,
mhm.
There's so many historical questions that need to be asked, and it would be an interesting way to find out. I think a place like the Serpent Mound, who built it? I'd be more curious just to say, okay,
Yeah,
I want to know more about it. Who can
right.
come forward,
And
and
why?
who
I
can,
mean, what was the
yeah,
why a
yeah, yeah.
serpent? And
I
if you
know.
look at, if you see it, it's actually a serpent that it looks like he's has a mouth open, like he's swallowing an egg. They think it's like an egg that he's
Wow.
eating. Like, well, what,
Yeah,
what's
like
that
what?
about? What does it symbolize? What's it mean?
Yeah,
There's other mounds too that have other forms, and some are just mounds.
yeah. But it's
But
still fascinating. Like, there's just so much history and so many little things that,
mhm.
I think that's part of spirit research. When you go to all these locations, you realize that somebody lived here, or
Yeah,
somebody worked here, somebody was a part of this story. And I think it's a part of unfolding those journeys. For me, I think that's exciting. And I think you and I are of like mind in many ways in how we do our research. And I always find that, like, extremely fascinating, just to
mhm.
dig at a story. Because everything
Yeah.
has a story.
Well, and I've always been a big history buff. Just straight
Oh, me
history. I mean, I
too.
love history.
Me too.
Any
Yeah.
kind of history. I've done a lot of Native Americans. I've written a lot about Native American history and stuff too.
Oh, I love it. Yeah.
But so yeah, so it's kind of a nice combination. And I like what you're saying. I hadn't really thought about it that way in terms of going deeper with trying to sort of get out the real history
Yeah.
through through spiritual work, through parapsychology, through
Yeah.
paranormal stuff.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Wow.
It was a way I was asked to design a show a few years ago. I'm like, okay, this is what I would like it to be, because there's just not a lot of people who have done it. Not that in a roundabout sort of way, some information doesn't get done, but there's so many questions out there that, because we weren't there, we just don't know. And can you imagine? You go to places like this, and somebody goes, like the story of this guy who went over the falls. It's like, oh, well, he didn't listen, did it his own way. But to hear what his thoughts were,
Yeah.
like inside as everything was unfolding, to me
Right.
was like, I felt like I had been hit in the chest. I was just like, oh God, like I could just feel, because I could just hear it in the voice. And it was just like, oh my gosh, like, and then to be told, well, here is the person, here is the story. I'm just like, it it worked, it worked, it worked. We
Yeah.
got we
Yeah.
got the history, we got the information, which is fascinating. Um, Humanity has been destroyed and rebuilt over and over again. You think our technology is the best ever? Nope. No, No, Helen, I think I just don't know if it will ever get there. We just seem to have a hard time getting it. From South America to North America, there are lots of serpents depicted in
Mhm.
their stones and mounds. Yeah, yeah, there is. Um, Yeah, so you've sent some pictures. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do a station ID and a sponsor ID, and then we can talk a bit about these locations. And I'll fumble around and bring up these couple of pictures, which are like very impressive, by the way. So I just saw those. I'm like, oh, I have to find a way to make this happen. So
Bizarre.
okay, so here we go. We're just going to go in. If you are just tuning in, you are listening to The Outer Realm, and hope, I know some people come in late, but you're missing all the fun here, guys. So you're listening to The Outer Realm. We're broadcasting live on the United Public Radio Network, UFO Paranormal Radio Network, 105.3, 107.7 FM from the beautiful city of New Orleans. We are also on Roku. Hopefully some of you guys are watching us on Roku and enjoying the show. We are with John Kachuba, and he's got loads of stuff to talk about, and we're going to be looking at a couple of photographs, which I think are going to be just mind-blowing for some of you. We are fully sponsored by Folgers Coffee, who have been a part of our journey since day one. So thank you, Folgers. Also, Dr. Snick, the sonic surgeon, aka Justin Snicker, who is an award-winning composer whose music can be found anywhere that good music can be found. Also, the artist behind all of the Outer Realm banners, Steve McGinnis. You can find him on Instagram and Facebook. Look him up. He's got great stuff. Anyway, everybody's like, oh, look, everybody's chiming in. I love it. Which brings me back to people harping. You can do a Folgers commercial and it'll be seen by millions of people, sit in the archives forever, and be seen by more millions of people. Just saying. Well, all right. Yes, get Roku. Get Roku. Okay. So which one do you want to start with? We've got Oliver House,
Yeah,
Punderson House.
let's do the let's see Oliver House first.
Okay, let me go in and bring this puppy up here. 1 minute.
I can do a little background.
Oliver House. All righty. Share her up. Bringing it on. There we go.
There we go. Oliver House. So the background to this story, which is really quite bizarre, is that the Oliver House is in Toledo, Ohio. And it began as a hotel back like in the mid-19th century, 1850s or so. And over time, it had some various uses, including as a military hospital for Spanish-American War veterans. Today, the whole building has been remodeled, and it's like an entertainment venue. There's some restaurants in there. There's a bakery. There's a movie theater. But also attached to it is like a 3-story apartment building, which was part of the old hotel and hospital. So where this photo comes from is, well, there's a ghost supposedly that they call the captain that is seen in the grounds a lot, especially in the bars. And they say he's wearing like an old military uniform from around maybe this time of the Spanish-American War. But this photo, so in that apartment building that I talked about, there's a little dinky elevator, one of these tiny elevators, like if you've ever been to France in an apartment building.
Oh, yes.
You might be able to get 2 people in, not 2 Americans, maybe 2 French people. But so there's one of those, and it's obviously very small. And the story is that there was a guy who was in the apartment. He was coming down the elevator. He gets on the elevator on the 3rd floor, and of course there's nobody in it. It's very tiny. He walks in, and door closes, and he starts going down. And as the elevator is descending, he just has this sense of not feeling right. Like he feels like there's somebody around him, almost like leaning over his shoulder, that kind of thing. Like, is there somebody behind me? But he knows there isn't. He's in this tiny elevator, but he's got a camera with him. He's going to some event where he's going to take a camera. So when the elevator hits the ground floor, the doors open, and he steps out, and just in a last-minute thought, he turns around and he takes a picture of the empty elevator compartment. That's what he gets.
Jeez.
Well, and so people say, well, what is this? And I say, well, we don't know what it is. I mean, keeping in mind that the Oliver House at one time was an old hospital. You know, people say, well, it looks like an old guy wearing kind of what they used to call, and when I was a kid, they used to call them Johnny coats, which were like hospital gowns. Kind of looks like that, but at the same time, it almost looks like he has suspenders on. So who is this guy? And when you show this picture around to people that work at the Oliver House or have been there, actually the original photo, this is my photo of the original photo. The original one is actually in the Oliver House. And if you go there, there's a micro brewery where this photo is, and you can ask the bartender or anybody there, and they'll show it to you. In fact, they'll take you on a tour of the haunted locations in the Oliver House. But we don't know who this guy is. And it's just really interesting because he's not the captain that people normally see. And he's only been seen in this photograph. Nobody has seen him in reality, in person. So I don't know what your audience thinks of this, but when I show this, at libraries and stuff, when it comes up, people, it's audible. People just go, what is that?
Well, Dolly is a medium, as she says. His name is Edward.
Edward.
So I don't know. Maybe it would be worth sort of, contacting them and say, so do we know anything about an Edward?
Okay, well, I'll keep that in mind. Yeah, because I'll be up there again.
Yeah, it's a really interesting photograph. I mean, to me, just from this perspective, it looked like it could be like a gown if it was a hospital sort of thing. Definitely looks. Okay. Well, okay. He's a Jew by the curls in his beard.
If that's a beard, it could be. I think it could be suspenders. Looks a bit like caretaker.
Yeah. Or repairman of sorts,
Repairman, yeah.
It's interesting. It's a really great capture, and for them to have it up, that's really interesting.
Yeah, like I say, they show it, and they're interested too. They like to find out, what it is.
Okay,
that's the Oliver House.
All right, we're going to come up here.
And you can go there in Toledo. You can have a nice drink in the bar. You can talk to people, and they will show you around because, like I said, there's haunted locations. In addition to the captain, there's been something that's been seen in the ladies' room. And the way it's described, some women have said, well, they've gone into the ladies' room and there's been, okay.
Yeah, no, that's okay. I'm going to let you.
That's okay.
Okay, I can just, for some reason, it should have went incognito mode, but it didn't. It just flashed right across when you were talking.
I'll get this. But just to finish the other one, so what women have seen in the ladies' room is they've seen a sort of a skeletal figure in a red dress.
Wow!
To walk into the ladies' room, and they'll do whatever, and they'll come out and usually in a little. I haven't been in a ladies' room, but
right.
I understand it's kind of nice, maybe a little couch or whatever. That she's sitting on this little chair when they come out, and of course they don't like that. So, okay.
Yeah.
This is from the Punderson State Park in Ohio. There's a beautiful lodge there, which used to be an old mansion owned by a member of the Cleveland family, not the president, but some relative. And over time, the guy went bankrupt. He lost the house. Anyway, the state of Ohio ended up with this beautiful, beautiful kind of mansion. And they decided, well, let's make that the lodge for this state park.
Wow.
So it's a great venue. What you're looking at here, there's a spiral staircase that goes upstairs. And people frequently, brides and all, will stand on the staircase and take pictures because it's a beautiful setting. So somebody went to a wedding up there and it took a picture of this stairwell with the spiral staircase and everything else. But it was totally empty. There wasn't anybody standing in it. It wasn't a bride or a groom or anybody, just the beautiful decor, the beautiful architecture and stuff. What appears is, this is what appeared on his photo when he was done. And I get a lot of different interpretations as to what that is. Some people have said, well, it looks like a woman because it's saying that it looks like you can see it looks like a skirt maybe or a dress. And the legs look kind of thin and more like a woman's legs than a man. When I look at it, to me, I see somebody whose back is to me. And
I see the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I see it as a man.
Yeah, me too.
Looks like he's more like a
Yeah. Yeah. I
He's
see
got
the
sort
same
of the
thing.
head bent down a little bit, and it looks like he has like his left leg kind of lifted as he's walking, and the right leg down.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But we have no idea again what this thing is. I mean,
Mm-hmm. It's interesting how it blocks out the railing on the further wall, up along the wall, how it just right where the back is, how it just blocks it out. And there was nobody there to your knowledge that could have just like, how you can sometimes just drag images through.
Right.
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 Yeah, that's interesting.
Right.
Yeah.
And parts you can see, like this, you can see the rail looks like it's transparent going through too. So you get these things, and the light is just kind of really weird lighting. I mean, there's a little lamp on the chair there.
Yes. I see that.
So,
walking away from the
man
stairs.
and woman walking away towards stairs. Interesting.
I don't
Two
know.
people. Wow.
Alan just thinks it's a bad photo.
Well, really, I have to say it's not my photo. So, but I'll confess to that. But the interesting thing about Punderson State Park is, talk about a haunting. About back in the 70s, I guess it went under major renovation. And they put in, new air conditioning and all this kind of stuff. So it was closed for a couple of months while this was being done. Well, the park was still open, the park grounds and everything. So they still had a ranger. And the ranger was on patrol one night with another guy. Two of them were patrolling the grounds. And there was an alarm that went off at the building. Now, the building at this point was shut down because it was under construction. So there were no guests in it or anything else like that. The AC was taken out, so it was hot. This was the middle of the summer. So the alarm goes off, and these two rangers go up to the house. They're not in any particular hurry or anything, because it turns out that, deer were wandering by and setting off a camera or something. So they figure, all right, it's not going to be any big deal.
Yeah.
They go in the house. And they walk around the ground floor and they don't see anything, but it's really hot inside. It's stuffy. It's locked up. They're sweating. All of a sudden, as they walk toward the stairs, like roughly where this character is here, they hear a scream. It sounds like a woman. They said it was like a piercing scream, and it sounded was coming from upstairs. So the two guys start running up the stairs, and they said as soon as they hit the stairs, the temperature in that whole place just dropped. They said it plummeted. I mean, it was hot. They were sweating. The guy that I talked to, the park ranger, even said, he was the one that did it. He said that it got so cold. He said, you can see our breath condense. He said it was like cold. The words he used was cold enough to hang meat. So like a freezer. Right?
Yeah.
Anyway, these two guys still run up the stairs, where I'm thinking I would have run down and out.
That's it. Yeah.
but brave guys. They ran up the stairs. When they got to the top of the stairs, everything stopped. The scream stopped just like that. The temperature went right back to hot again. And they looked around and there was nothing. They examined all the rooms upstairs and everything else. There wasn't anything. There wasn't any animal. There wasn't any person. So they have no idea what that was about. But it's interesting, though, to think that we have this figure at the stairs.
Yeah.
Whatever it is. Bad photo. Who knows?
Who knows? Yeah, but I don't know. I see the same thing as you see, though. I do see a man walking towards the stairs, and he's got his arm out like this, and he's that's the first thing I saw.
There's been a lot of other sightings at Punderson, and in fact, at one time, we have gypsies in Ohio that come through seasonally, and they do roofing and driveways and stuff like that. But they used to camp up here at Punderson every year when they came through. And one year they came through, and 2 or 3 gypsy women were walking along. There's a lake here. And actually, the lake is extreme. It's weird. It's like one of these glacial lakes. It's extremely deep.
Wow.
For Ohio, it's like bizarre. Really, really deep.
Is this like at a national state park? Sorry, is this at a
state park?
Oh, okay, that's right. Okay, yeah.
Punderson State Park.
I think I might have saw something on this, on mysteries of state parks or something.
Maybe.
Yeah, it just sounds familiar.
It's up way in the northeast part, sort of around Ashtabula, close to the lakes up there.
Yeah. So sorry, please carry on.
So these two or three gypsy women were walking. It was night, and they were kind of just walking along by the lake shore. It was a nice summer evening, and they said that all of a sudden they looked out there and they saw rising up from the lake. They saw a young woman, like 17 or 18, kind of just rise up from the center of the lake and come moving toward them.
Mm-hmm.
And they, according to what I was told by other people there, they said something, I don't know what they said to him, and it apparently disappeared. But there had been a girl that had drowned in that lake only the year before, and she was about that age.
Oh, boy.
But that was the last time that the gypsies stayed there. They never came back.
Oh, yeah, very superstitious.
He said,
yeah.
No thanks, we're done.
Wow, wow.
Anyway, there's all these great stories from Punderson, and it's funny because it's a beautiful park, beautiful lodge, and they're they own up to it. I mean, I got half these stories and information from the superintendent at the park. I mean, they're willing to say, yeah, this is what people are telling us they're experiencing and everything else up there. So.
Yeah, I think, a lot of your state parks apparently are very, very haunted, or they have a lot of really, shall we say, they're mysterious. Probably the best way to put it.
Right.
I mean, you have a lot of acreage, so I mean, there's a lot of room for high levels of high strangeness, as they say,
Yeah.
But I am sure that I've heard something based similar on this story, and it's the lake that you mentioned that got me. I think another tale it was told was a young boy who came up, and there was somebody sitting by the water, and
Okay.
But apparently a lot of people passed away, like a lot of people, and they'll just walk to their deaths. They're just drawn in, and they'll just walk right out to right into the water, and loved ones are going, "What are you doing?" and they just keep going.
Where are you going?
I know, land between the lakes. Yes, there we go.
Right.
But yeah, so I don't know. So you are working on other books.
I am.
Are they along the same lines? Your investigations?
So what I've done is I've sort of moved away from the nonfiction, and I've taken what my experiences have been and what I've learned and put it into fiction.
Oh,
so I mean, I already have a novel that came out a couple of years ago called Dark Entry, which is based on an actual location in Connecticut, which is called Dark Entry, or Dudleytown. I'm sure a lot of people have heard of Dudleytown. And I grew up in Connecticut, so I'd been up there and everything else.
Right.
So I wrote that. But I have a new book coming out in June, which is for middle grade kids, like age maybe 10 to 12.
Very nice. Very nice.
Yeah, well, see, I believe that you should try to scare the pants off your children.
No, really. Why don't you just give me your haunted books? I'll do it.
I mean, there's actually some theory to that, because we live in such a world that the reality is when you have shootings and earthquakes and wars,
life's scary enough.
A lot of kids end up messed up. So if you can maybe teach them sort of the real kind of fictional horror and stuff, that maybe you get somewhere. So it's a ghost story, and it's not a terribly horror story. There's some humor in it, but it is a ghost story, and it takes place. It's going to be the first in a series, and each one is going to take place in an actual haunted location.
Do you want me to put the picture up? Can I do that
sure.
right now? Is it the same? Okay, I just want to make sure. I don't want to get ahead like the last time. Some picture throws itself up and you're not even done talking yet.
That's fine.
Did I see how fast that was?
So that place it's called Chateau La Roche. Sometimes they call it the Loveland Castle because it's in Loveland, Ohio, which is just outside of Cincinnati. And I used to live in Loveland.
Beautiful.
This place, it's gorgeous. It's a reconstruction of a Norman castle. It's a 1/4 scale Norman castle. So it's big. And it was built by one man over a period of decades, who actually died working on it. He was like in his 80s and he was still working on it. And he had an accident, ended up in the hospital, and he died. But this place, there's a group of guys now who are called Knights of the Golden Trail. And it's kind of a little organization, and they've finished the work on it. They maintain it. It's open to the public. It's a venue for weddings, and
beautiful.
It's great. And you can't see it, but it's right on the riverbank of the Little Miami River. So off to the
Wow.
right there, you're about 20 yards away from the river. I mean, it's gorgeous, gorgeous location. Anyway, it's haunted by Harry Andrews, who is the guy who built it. But it's also, even Harry, when Harry was building this thing, he lived in it, and he was all by himself. He never married, never had kids. So he lived in this place by himself as he was building it. And he would talk about what he would see in the area. And he would see ghosts like in the woods back up here and along the river. So there's all these other ghosts that are there, in addition to people saying Harry is still there and hasn't left it. So the novel is called Haycorn Smith and the Castle Ghost. And it takes place, it's centered around here at Loveland Castle. So it's, I hope to have the launch of the book. If any of them are listening, I'd like to have the launch of the book at the castle.
Oh, well, that would be nice. Have you approached them?
Are they what?
Have you approached them and said,
Not yet. Not yet. But I know some of them. I mean, I would think they'd be willing to do it.
I think it'd be great. Just show them the episode and just flash it all there in front of millions of people who could be able to see it.
Right.
That might help.
Well, and I'd probably also donate a lot of the sales because this is a nonprofit, and they can use the money to help support it and everything too. So
I think it's great. It's great.
So that's coming up.
Oh wow, that's just coming up. I think that's great. It's like wow. So this is going to be a series then.
Yeah.
And do you have your sights on the next location already, or is that something?
Well, I'm looking at a couple of places. Yeah, actually, we talked about Native American before, and there's a place just north of Cincinnati by about 40 miles that was built by the Adena culture, and there's some earthworks left up there, and there's a park there and everything. And I want to set one in a Native American context.
That would be great.
Yeah. So again, talking to the spirits and using the real history of, what we know to be the real history of the area and tie that all in. New Orleans is another location.
Yeah. Well, you pick the places there.
I know. I went down there for another nonfiction book that might still come out at this point. I don't know, but I worked with some voodoo practitioners for a while down there. And that was very interesting. So I'd like to do, the voodoo element in New Orleans. And I got a lot of ideas, but
Oh yeah. I love how you're just incorporating everything into it.
Well, it's what I know. It's fun, and it's a learning process for me. And again, even when I'm writing these things, even though it's fiction, a novel, I'm still learning stuff. I'm doing research and I'm learning a lot, which is
like a little bit of historical fiction in a way.
Yeah, it is. Well, so I have another book coming out this year as well. Now that you mentioned it.
All right, go crazy.
You mentioned it, but this is called The Bottle Conjurer, and it's a trilogy. It's the first novel of a trilogy, and I'm actually co-authoring this with a cousin.
Right.
And it's set in 18th century London, and it has a lot to do with magic. And we talked about gypsies before. There's gypsies involved, and there's a guy trapped in a bottle, and all that kind of stuff. But we had to do a lot of historical research for that. And that's been fun to do that.
Right. Well, maybe now you can do one where your character is maybe a medium or a researcher who wants to try to find out the history or the mystery behind a certain something. Bah, bah, bah. We can go forever with that one. Let me.
Where would I find somebody like that, Michelle?
I don't know. I don't know, but I'm sure you could probably mix it up with a lot of people that
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Endless, because the world is full of mysteries, and it's full of, like I say, we're always so happy to just shrug away and dismiss some of our history, but how many pieces of that do we just have no answers to?
I know. Einstein, a physicist, right? A genius, has this famous quote about, he said, "I don't want to live in a universe that has no magic in it."
It's true. The universe is full of magic.
Right.
It is. It is fantastic. Well, we're slowly, finishing up, and I'm really glad you came on the show. I always have a good time when you're on, and just love sharing stories, and it's nice to speak to somebody of like mind as well. And let us know when you're, getting all of your books put together, and
Will.
yeah, I love it. I love it. So thank you, and I hope you have a fantastic weekend.
Thank you, Michelle. I appreciate it. It's always been fun being on your show. So thanks so much.
Aw, thank you. I'll be in touch.
Okay. I'll be around.
All right, darling. Take
Bye-bye.
care. Good night. Well, we've come to the end of another fantastic segment. What about those pictures, though? Just saying. It's like, wow, they were amazing. I see. I love the whole perception thing. How we all see different things, and yet here we are. There's only one answer. Always curious to see what that is. There we go. Wasn't going to be. I wasn't able to see all my messages. Like, you guys just all disappeared. Everything's freezing up on me. Well, that just tells me I have to end probably. There we go. There we go. All right, back on track. Holy smokes. So anyway, sleepy night, Dolly. It's always nice when you tune in. Night night. Well, again, we'd like to give a big thank you to John Kachuba. It's just so laid back, and it's just such a comfortable conversation. Big thank you to him for joining us. Big thank you to Folgers Coffee. Big thank you to Justin Snicker, aka Dr. Snick, the Sonic Surgeon. Big thank you to Steve McGinnis. Love you all. You'll see we've got our email just scrolling across here. Feel free to contact us. If you love us, you hate us. Hopefully you love us. If you want to be a guest, if you'd like to suggest a guest or ideas, please do feel free to contact us there. Subscribe, like, follow. We appreciate your support so very much. Now, next week, fingers crossed, the bubble's going to be back. Yeah, right? Because we are starting Wednesday off with a Q&A. Yes, we're having our monthly Q&A. You'll notice, like, we're in February. We're trying to do them every month because we do get a lot of requests for them. And when I say Q&A, it's kind of like, having a little parlay, having a big discussion. But we might do something a little bit different, meaning we will pick a topic or several. As you know, you guys sort of lead the way as to where things are going, but we might do something a bit different. And if you have a haunted tale or an experience that you want to talk about, let us know. Pay attention to this email. Send me an email and say, here's the just basic gist of what I'd like to share. We're going to try to give people, I mean, obviously we can't have a whole lot of people on, but we're going to try to take maybe, 3 or 4 people, and I will send you a link to the soundboard, which means you're going to come on with us, probably, in around end of the first half, starting in the second half of the show. And you're going to get to come on the soundboard here with us, and you're going to be able to tell us your story and interact with a couple of people in chat, whoever's in with questions. And, we thought that might be kind of fun. But I need all that information in advance, because I can't just put the link to the soundboard up and, having a whack of people, because then I can't get to everybody and the whole soundboard fills up. So it would have to be arranged in advance. So there's the email. Let me know. And at that point, when I have your email and we choose your story, then we were going to send off a link, and we will basically make sure you're in chat, because we're going to say, okay, we're starting, and we're going to send you a link, and you get to share in the show. So I think that was darn exciting. I'm anxious to see who's got what. Anyway, Thursday night, of course, welcomes the return of Brad Olson for part 2 of his book, Beyond Esoteric, Escaping the Prison Planet. Part 1 was super interesting. I mean, he's got an amazing set of books. The Beyond Esoteric series are just really excellent. So I have no doubt that part 2 is going to be just as interesting. So get ready for that as well. So in the meantime, for me, it's moving weekend. So I know, can't wait. But for the rest of you, I hope you all have something really exciting planned, and I hope you have a lot of fun. Relax if you need to relax, have fun if you need to have fun, but stay safe, and we shall see you guys next week. So good night from the outer realm.